Okay, Mark here. Carl's on the camera. I'm going to show you how to make a very simple pinch pot or tea bowl. And we're going to show you several ways to make it, but this is probably the most basic. It's just you're making a basic kind of shape, right? Something that you could drink out of or something you could put your stuff in. But all of these have in common a kind of oval shape, and they also have a foot on it. So I'll show you how to make the basic form and then how to attach a foot onto the bottom. So I'm going to start out with about as much clay as a somewhere between a baseball and a softball, maybe a little bit bigger than a baseball. And I'm going to take a little bit of clay away so that I have this for the foot. And I'm going to wedge this out, and I don't want the clay to get any drier. So I'm going to just moisten the area that I'm going to wedge on. And if you are using your board, you might want to just moisten your board a little bit, not soggy wet, not water spilling off it, but just so it's a little bit moist. So as you're wedging, you don't dry out the clay anymore.
Yeah, otherwise the wood is going to take the moisture out of your clay.
Right.
If you get it sloppy wet, it's just going to be slimy, messy, and slip around.
Right. And that's a good point, is that as you're using the clay and get to know it, you're going to realize that it completely changes as you're using it more and more. It dries out. And so how do you add water into it? How do you take water away from it, and that kind of thing? Okay, so this clay is all ready to go. It's nicely wedged up. This clay is going to be for my foot. And I'm going to make this into a ball at first. And again, I'm shooting for a shape kind of like these. And later on, with one of these shapes, I might decide I want to really thin it out and make it differently. But to start out with, get my thumb a little bit wet, and I'm going to choose place in the middle, and I'm going to simply drill down until I can put my palm on this side. I can feel myself getting close to the other side.
So what is your thumb on the inside doing, and what are your fingers on the outside doing?
Okay, on the inside, my thumb is all the way to the bottom, and on the outside, I am pressing against these two fingers like this.
So you're pinching the clay.
Pinching, and that's then causing the clay to go up towards my hand. By pinching, the clay kind of gets pulled up towards me.
So when you pinch the clay has to move.
Right.
And then you're kind of steering which way it moves. You could make it wider, or you could make it taller. In this case, it looks like you're trying to make it a little bit taller.
Right.
As you pinch that clay, you're kind of pushing it towards the top of the pot.
Right. And you see how each time I'm also moving my hands a little bit. I pinch, and I move my hands. So again, starting way down here. Now there's another little motion that you start with your hand now. Now that's just pinching like this, and if you notice, I'm pinching, but my thumb is not moving. It's just pinching, and the clay gets pushed up that direction. You get it?
Right.
Now, one of the big tendencies is that as you're doing this, this shape just goes out like a V shape.
And it gets wide like a flat bowl.
Right. And you might not want that. Now, if that's what you want, fine, you're golden. But if you want a shape that comes up and has walls that come more straight, you need to make sure that you're tipping it back at the top and leave a little heftiness up here to the rim so that it kind of holds everything in place till the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so leave the rim, the top lip, leave that nice and thick. Don't thin that out until you get to the very end. Also, leave the top narrow, and you can always make it wider. But if you make it too wide and too thin, you can't get it back.
Right. And for your average hands, you know, you don't want to start with a huge piece of clay because it's hard to reach all the way down in there. So a smaller piece of clay, maybe even a little smaller than I used, or the size that I use, depending on your hands, right, for making your first ones. Now these are just your basic pinch pot and or tea bowls. And you can see, here's another move, is that I now am going to start refining, and you'll notice that I reach over here and get my hands just a little moist, not sopping wet.
Tiny bit moist, not too much.
Tiny, yeah. You don't want
it just gets gooey.
You don't want the gooiness. Avoid the gooey factor. But look what I'm doing on the inside to shape this. Look how my thumb is kind of going up the side, but what it's doing is pushing against my fingers on the outside. So I have these two fingers either here and here or there, and my thumb is coming up. And that's going to also shape and thin out the walls. So this is a simple way to make a pinch pot. And what I'm doing is I'm really trying to avoid these walls going out. And let me show you what happens if I just keep doing this. See how it's starting to go out like this?
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Do not do it. Now, if it starts to do that, there's ways to kind of correct. We can come in here and sort of paddle it back in a little bit. You can get a lot of different things for paddles.
And you know, hey, one of the other things is that Mark has been doing this. I mean, he's not a pinch pot guy, but he's been making ceramics for 40 years. So he can do this pretty easily. It might take you guys 5 tries to get one nice bowl, and that's totally okay. You can reuse your clay. You can bag it back up, you can rehydrate it. Don't feel like that first pot that you make is something you even have to keep.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And don't get upset when it doesn't work the first time. Just like try it, learn from your mistakes, and try another one. Okay?
Now see how the,
yeah, go.
See how the top is irregular here? Like that's all thick and that's thin? So that's because I pulled it out and I made a certain area of the top thin and the other area is still thick.
Right.
So I'm going to try to correct that now.
By making the other parts thinner?
I'm going to try to correct it by actually removing some of this.
Okay.
And I'm just going to go around here and make a line. And I'm doing this because I'm adapting, because it's not quite what I wanted. I screwed up in my own mind because I went out too far. And I'm going to go grab the A-cup. One thing you can have, you know, this is nice to have this at home. And you can also get these from clay stores. They're just nice little sharper knives. And I can come around here and just take a little bit of this clay away.
There, so you just, I mean, even if you had a terribly uneven rim, you can just even it out really quick by cutting off some of the clay.
Right, so that's much more even. And now I'm going to go back and I'm going to give this shape what I want. Nice. All right. Now, in my mind, I'm going to let this get, this is wet clay, and once I have the basic form that I like, I'm going to let it dry until it's leather hard, and at that point I'm going to carve away at it and do different things to it to make it thinner and to refine the shape. So when clay's wet like this, you only want to do a certain amount of things. And then you kind of got to stop and wait until it's the right dryness to do something else. So this is crazy wet clay, really gooey, really plastic. And so what I do want to do last is put a foot on the bottom of it. A foot like that.
Are you going to do that now, or are you going to let it dry first?
I'm going to go ahead and put the foot on now.
Okay.
And then we can carve away at it later. So I know I'm going to do something else to the shape, but the basic form I can live with. I just need to thin it out and refine it, right? Okay, so there's your basic cup, basic pinch pot.